just said, "You've got cancer."
And that's when the real work happened in us. And I spent a lot of nights in the garage, crawled up in the car, crying my eyes out. But when I got out of the car, I put on the armor of God, and He gave me strength.
I came across the verse, "What time I am afraid, I will trust in you." And that's what I need. That's what I needed, you know. I was probably 18 or 19 and I met Geri Ann. She was just turning maybe 16. She was still in high school, so we met, and of course, I was ready to be in a relationship. I knew I loved her from the time I met her.
You know, when I turned 16, I started working and basically took care of myself at that point. And that's also about the same time I started dating Mike. We had a mutual friend that introduced us, and he, I think, may have got married that week if I would have said yes. But
I asked her to marry me when I think she was maybe 17. And we were going to set out to rule the world, you know. And she said yes, of course. And I tell people all the time, she turned 18 in April, graduated high school in May, and we got married in June.
I was young and just living life. I wasn't thinking about anything long term. And the more I was around him, the more I fell in love with the man that he was and the character that he had and the goodness of his spirit. I tell this story all the time. I was so silly that I, in my mind, thought, you know, we've got 2 good jobs, we've got a microwave, we've got a vacuum cleaner, let's just have a baby. That's how simple-minded I was.
Of course, we had Cameron 2 years later. About this time when Connor's born is about the time I started having some significant health issues. And not that they were bad, but they were enough that they were bothering me, you know.
Mike had always kind of had some stomach problems, and we kind of joked about them actually. And then when I was pregnant with Connor, we were building a house, and that's when that's when we realized there was some serious stuff going on with him. Mike worked hard in a local manufacturing position, and I was a stay-at-home mom, and that was our life.
We came to the point of finally, they told me they thought I had Crohn's disease. They was pretty sure I had Crohn's disease. And of course, you know, it's because it's something that can't be fixed, basically. So I was very upset.
I can remember the doctor coming into the room where we were and saying, "Who in your family has Crohn's disease?" And I just, you know, I was like, "Well, there's no one that I know of, Michael. Do you know what?" I mean, and we had no idea what Crohn's disease was. So we were at Indian Path Hospital, and I can remember looking out that window and wondering, well, wonder what Crohn's disease is, you know. So we began to research and understand a lot about it. The doctors were very good to us. But at that moment right there, I remember just almost feeling invisible, like when the doctors explained things to us. Because Mike was very sick. There are a lot of people that have Crohn's. And like Mike right now, people meet him and they have no idea what's going on with him. And I just remember feeling invisible with everything going on. And I'm over here like I have no control of anything.
And I kept trying to work and be off and work and be off and different things. And after being off for a while, they came in one time and told me, just said, "You're going to have to, we're not going to let you come back to work. We don't have anything else for you to do," basically. So I basically lost my job. And of course I couldn't work. And you know, that's not a good situation for you as far as trying to manage your family. You're trying to think about what the future's going to look like. You've got a house payment, you got a car payment, you know, and the bills keep coming in the mailbox. So,
2 small kids, and such a doubt about our future and what that was going to look like. Because, I mean, let's face it, I was a stay-at-home mom with no skills. You know, I have a lot of skills, but none that looks like anything on paper.
it's not a good thing to be in the situation, but we did the best we could, and Geri Ann would do things, you know, babysit, whatever it took to make it all work. She did that, and we did whatever we needed to get by.
So after years of him battling his Crohn's and being back and forth to work, and just a lot of, you know, uncertainties and drama, you know, he was on a lot of medication, that prednisone, and if you know anything about that, that in itself will about drive you crazy, and in turn just about drove me crazy and just about ended our marriage. But I was surrounded by a lot of people that loved me, supported me, and when I started feeling like I was on that island by myself, they loved me harder. So one of the hardest things for Mike was he went from working, doing as many hours as it took to take care of our family and me being a stay-at-home mom, to not having a job. And that wasn't his choice. It was never where we dreamed we would be, but that was our story. And there were a lot of hard times, a lot of brokenness. I could tell so many stories about how the Lord provided for us, but there is one particular story that really sticks out in my mind. I told you earlier that my grandparents are from Southwest Virginia. My grandmother grew up in a coal camp, and we were broke. You know, like I said, we never were hungry necessarily, but we didn't have extras. We was to the point that I was counting my grocery money when I went through the grocery store to make sure I had enough to buy what we needed. And our house payment was always made, but we were always very close to not being able to make it. And we were trying to save our credit and all of that. So we were broke, and a friend of mine from Gate City I can remember what she had on. Anyway, we didn't talk to a lot of people about it because we didn't want people to feel sorry for us. We didn't want to be seen as those people that don't have any money. And I didn't want my kids to grow up feeling that way. I think it's important for kids to feel valued, and money in this world, it creates a lot of value that is not real. So I didn't want them to feel like that because we didn't have a lot of money that anyone else was any more valuable than them. So we needed to make our house payment, didn't have the money. Mike and I had talked about it, which we tried. I tried not to talk a lot to him about it because he didn't need any more stress on him. And randomly, my friend from Gate City, we had met in Lamal's class when I was pregnant with Cameron. We have 2 sons the same age. And she knocked on my door and she said, "Come out here and help me." And she had a truck bed full of groceries. And she handed me a check. And I said, "Well, what's this from?" And she gave the person's name. I'm not going to repeat, but he is very affluent in Southwest Virginia due to the coal mines. And he had sent money to us. And it was enough to pay the payment that was due and to be 1 payment ahead. Exactly. And you know, that's not, people can look at life however they want to, but that's not a happenstance. You know, the Lord truthfully provided for us. And I've never doubted him a whole lot with money since then. Shortly after that, I remember joking with the boys saying, "Well, I'm going to get this job and I'm going to get that job, and you need to be prepared for me not to be at home." But before you knew it, I was working in medical support staff, and that was the job that the door was opened for me by the Lord, and I could be at home of the evenings and on the weekends with my kids, and that was important to me. But my income was just enough for us to get by, and never could get ahead.
I went into the doctor for something, and it was obviously my Crohn's disease doctor, gastroenterologist, and they had done some kind of they'd done a biopsy on me. I'd had a colonoscopy and done a biopsy on me, and they came back and they told me to come back into the doctor, and they said he just said, "You've got cancer."
And that's when the real work happened in us. I had grew up a lot through those years. I wasn't that girl that was in high school just having fun anymore.
And he said, I can't tell you how bad it is or how good it is or what it's going to be like or anything, but you need to go to the oncologist, and you need to follow whatever they tell you. So we did that, and I'm almost in a daze, just how I feel really. It's just because probably, I turned 40 in October. I was diagnosed in November, so I was only 40 years old.
I grew a lot, but the diagnosis of cancer, it made me pull my britches up. That's when the real growth started happening. And I can remember thinking to myself, I have no idea what this is going to look like, and I don't know where we're going to be, but I know I better figure it out because I've got two boys.
I know there's obviously a lot of people that have cancer when they're young, so it's not like I was the first person, but when you're young, you just don't feel like that should be happening. In my mind, I thought I was going to die, and you get in your way of thinking, and you don't think about it from the Lord's standpoint, but you think about it from the human standpoint.
Me being the control person that I am, not knowing what the next year's was going to look like was hard for me, because I was a little bit of a micromanager of everything. And when you have that type personality, the unknown wears you out. So during those weeks and months, the thing that really got me more than anything was I didn't know, but God did know. And the scripture that I claimed was just to be still.
We went to the oncologist, and I got the camp. I had to have so many. I think it was 15 treatments of chemotherapy treatments before I had the surgery. And in the middle of that, having my treatments for chemo, I actually developed another issue that I had. Another complication with the Crohn's disease and the cancer on top of that.
Constantly I would say to myself, just be still and quit trying to figure it out. And I would think to myself, something that I say to people all the time, you were born for this. And that's not anything to be bragging on me, but to be bragging on the Lord. Because the diagnosis could have come to any family. They could have come to anyone. But God knew before, when He put us together, when He formed us in the womb, what our story was going to be. And it was my job just to trust it. So the first thing was just to be still. And the second thing I just kept telling myself over and over was, you were born for this. This is your story. You were born for this. And I believe that there are these moments in our lives that are pivotal. We make a choice. Either you're going to choose to believe that that's what God's plan is for you, or you're going to be defeated by whatever you're looking at, whatever you're facing. It could be health, it could be divorce, it could be death, it could be anything. But we have a choice to make in times like that that could forever change the trajectory of our life.
I was in the hospital, I guess maybe a week with that. So I had the surgery and came through that, and then I had to actually have radiation and chemo both after I had the surgery. And I think it was the same amount again of the chemo. It was like 15 treatments, and I think it was maybe 8 radiation treatments. And it was, the radiation, that's the tough one. It's very hard because it burns you, literally burns you.
And as weak as I was, I knew he was strong and he would get me through whatever it faced. And I also, during that time, began to look at life a lot differently, because we think so small when we think about our life. We think about the beginning and we think about the end. We have these, that's just how our mind works, in my opinion. But there's a lot of in between. And that time here on earth is so small, but eternity is forever. And he is growing in us during our walk here on this earth, in my opinion, and from what I believe the scripture teaches us. He is growing in us a faith that, to me, is hard to even put in words.
I probably had maybe a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years. And then I started kind of getting sick again, honestly. And I was really in bad shape. I mean, probably down, very skinny. And I went to, we wanted to go to the Vanderbilt Hospital, and our doctor actually gave us a referral, and we got that. That's
when I really started to grow and really started to dig in and understand and trust that my time on this earth is short, but eternity with him is forever. And only the Lord would determine when that would happen for Mike or when it would happen for me. But while I'm here, I'm digging in, and I'm going to do the best that I can for my family. And I just wasn't giving up at that point. And that wasn't always easy.
I went down there and she just said, well, if you keep having these problems, I'm going to do this for you, do that for you, but if you have a major issue, just come to the emergency room down here. So I guess it wasn't even 2 weeks, and I was in bad shape. So our son, Cameron, drove me. Geri Ann had to work one more day. I think it was a Thursday. She worked on a Friday and drove down there that next day. But Cameron took my oldest son. He was probably, I'm gonna say he was 18 or 19. He drove me down there, and I went into the emergency room. But I was there for over a week, and I'd had an abscess come up in my bowels again. So they went in, and I had to wait a while, you know, for everything to clear before I could have surgery. But I ended up having surgery on that.
I'm very emotional, as you can tell. I'm very much an empath. So watching Mike struggle was really hard for me, and not being able to fix it. And I spent a lot of nights in the garage, crawled up in the car, crying my eyes out. But when I got out of the car, I put on the armor of God, and he gave me strength, because I wanted my boys to have some consistency. I wanted them to feel secure and safe and not live in that fear. I was determined for them not to live in fear during their youth. And it's funny because now my youngest son, Connor, says, well, I just didn't even really think Dad was that sick. And I said, that's exactly what you were supposed to think, you know. Because at one point, I remember us, because his health was just, you know, had such a, it's like everything evolved around what was going on with Mike and how he was feeling. And I can remember having a meeting, family meeting, and us saying, you know, boys, when there's something big going on, you're going to know about it. But we're going to stop talking about this every day, because it doesn't matter. None of us are promised forever. We were sitting around the table. I can remember it as clearly as I'm sitting here right now. And I said, from now on, we're not going to let this and the what ifs determine our life. And we had a thing in our family that, because we've all got big personalities, so if you didn't have the spoon, you couldn't talk. I can remember it clearly because I was tired and I did not want them to feel that. I wanted them to feel safe and secure and feel the faith that I had that the Lord was going to take care of us, even if that meant that our days on earth were limited. He's still in control. And that's a hard thing to get down deep in your soul, but once you get it, it changes your life, you know.
Since then, I have actually done pretty good. You know, overall, I've done decent. I've not had, you know, it could, obviously when you're sick, you want it to be perfect, but it's never that way.
And there's a peace that comes from that. And, you know, I kind of joke now with people and I'll say, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? We die. You know, that's the worst thing that can happen. Praise the Lord. But until you've walked through stuff like that, I think you fear death a lot more. And I can remember thinking, as the boys got older, and Cameron actually graduated from high school. This is during the period of time that Mike had just got through all of his cancer treatments. And I remember thinking, I've got to go back to school because I can't live this close the rest of my life. Because I was middle-aged, didn't have a lot of skills. So I went back to school, started school the same year that Cameron did. I ended up graduating the same year that Cameron did. The difference was I had an associate's degree and he had a bachelor's degree. But I went back to school. It didn't make a big difference in my life one way or the other. After I got my degree, I started making different attempts to secure positions that the doors just didn't open for me. And during this period of time, you know, Connor had started college. Mike was doing fairly well and is still doing well. And I told Connor, I said, you know, when you get through college, I'm going to do something that I can work as hard as I want to work, and I'll be compensated according to my efforts, not because someone else tells me what my value is. Because through all of that, the strength that grew in me was more than I ever knew I had in me. It was not the same kid that just wanted to go to have more fun, you know. It was, you know, somewhat a warrior, you know, and I just didn't want my life to be like that anymore. So, long story short, Connor graduated, I started real estate, and one of the young ladies that worked beside of me, she called me her work mom. I'd known her since she was just a young girl, and I told her, I said, I'm getting my real estate license. I'm going to do something I want to do, and I know I can do this. And she said, so odd, my sister's going to start looking for a house probably within the next few months. And I said, if you will tell her to wait on me, she will never find anyone that will work harder for her than I will. And believe it or not, she did. The day that I left my job and started real estate the next day, that day I had a house under contract. Day one. I didn't even know what a purchase sale agreement was. So, but I knew how to show houses, and they knew I loved them, and they trusted me. And that started to snowball, that one person having faith in me, and it's just been nonstop since.
I would like to be stronger and say, you know, be able to say, this time I'm going to trust in the Lord. Whatever He has, I'm going to trust in it. And that's how I would like to be able to look at it if it happened again. Is have more faith in the Lord. And you know, I will say during that time, of course you're reading your Bible and trying to get a view on it, you know. And I came across the verse, what time I am afraid, I will trust in you. And that's what I need. That's what I needed, you know. Because you are afraid. People, we can be masculine and think we're not going to be, but you are afraid. But you have to trust in the Lord to give you that peace, you know.
So my one piece of advice for someone that's going through any kind of hardship, it could be, you know, being set back with your career, it could be health, it could be anything, is to not give up, but to give up feeling like you're in control. because letting go of when Mike first got his diagnosis with Crohn's disease, and then when he got his diagnosis with cancer, as I said, I was a completely different person by that point. And letting go and trusting him gave me the best hold of all. And to realize that we can't control everything, and to trust the Lord for what he has done and his plan for our life. Letting go gave me the best hold of all. And there's nothing else in this world that is ever going to be steadfast but the Lord. It can't be our jobs, it can't be our careers, it can't be the real estate market, it can't be the doctors, but the Lord's going to be steadfast. And his plan for our life is what really matters, because we have a ripple effect. And what if, when I was the one that had to step up, if I had felt defeated and gave up and not got out of the car with the armor of God on me? What would have happened to my kids? Then what would have happened to their kids?
I'm thankful for the health I have. I'm thankful for my salvation. I'm thankful for my family. We have 2 sons, 2 daughter-in-laws, 2 grandchildren, or 3 grandchildren with another one on the way. And you know, I'm probably as happy as I've ever been. I'll be honest with you. So life, the Lord can take a bad thing and turn it into something good.
So to me, making the choice to follow the Lord, regardless of what you're facing, that's the piece of advice I would give you, regardless of what it is. Just follow him and trust his plan. It sounds very simple and easy, but it's not. But when you apply it and you let go to get that better hold, that's the best time of your life.
We had the best time in fellowship, and Pastor gave us a word from the Lord, and then I was anointed and prayed over. It settled my soul. It gave me peace. It told me that God's people were there for me. But I can walk through my house now and I see those things. And it reminds me of how great a God I serve. He is the great physician. But almost every day I think, God healed me of cancer.